hello there, Freda Wallace. How are you?
I'm all right, thank you. What's been going down?
Sorry?
What's been going
What's been going down? I don't know.
More arguments on tabloid TV?
Yes. So we're here today to discuss your latest appearance on GB News. You want to tell us all about that?
Yeah, well, I was asked to come on again because they were originally the setup. I got a phone call said, "Will you come on and talk about transgender sports?" Like, I thought, right, okay, but because while I'm not a sports expert or anything like that, or any kind of I watched sport and I paid attention to trans women in sport. But when they said it was going to be with Sharron Davies. And I thought this would be interesting because the only thing I know about Sharron Davies, the only reason I know about Sharron Davies is because she's come into the trans hostile arguments and her, she has been involved with Sex Matters and the LGB Alliance. They do boost her. So that's where I'm coming from with this discussion. I'm not particularly interested in the minutiae of the testosterone levels and the physicality and all that. I'm interested in why the debate exists on GB News now. Why are people that were previously, not very concerned with parity and fairness in society suddenly very, very interested in fairness when it comes to trans women being in sport? So that's the crux of it for me. It's like suddenly people are thinking, we have to be fair to people.
So I think the question around the kind of posing today is, should there be a category for trans sports people within sports, like a separate category?
Yeah,
I think that was kind of like the main question, but it kind of goes into all the, the science. So yeah, are you ready to do the review?
Oh, just before we play it, just say, like I said, I was told it was going to be with Sharron Davies, and what happened was they put Sharron on, but Sharron did a segment which was about 4 minutes, I think, maybe a bit less, and then they said we're going to introduce Freda Wallace now with Kellie Maloney, and I'd only heard of Kellie Maloney, vaguely, so I didn't have anything to say to Kellie Maloney. She's a trans woman who used to train boxers. That's all I knew about her. Yeah. So all the stuff that I wanted to say to Sharron, I had to sort of bin that and start from just riff it off the top of my head. Because I did want to challenge Sharron and say, why is it I've only seen you come into this debate?
I suspect that was a last minute change on Sharon's part, which didn't want to maybe talk directly to a trans person. I'm speculating there, don't know.
Scared to death of me, aren't they? I don't know. I just think maybe she doesn't. I mean, it's fair enough. She don't want to talk to me.
It's fair.
Who the hell am I? But the thing is, it would have been nice.
Maybe she didn't have time. I don't know. But anyway,
if you're going to start commenting on trans people, because this is wider issue than sport, obviously. Because if there was a simple answer to this, we would have it. If there was a simple science, if there was a simple way of measuring, if there was a simple thing that would tip that scale, say, oh yeah, you can't do this because it's unfair, you can't do that, we'd have had that answer by now, but there isn't, and there's so many variables and there's so many unknowns.
Yeah, it's a very complicated topic.
So
Kirsty Miller is my go-to person for anything to do with trans
Kirsty
people
Miller.
in sports.
I got a few things from Kirsty Miller's profile when I was doing this,
and she was on a radio show on, I think it was ABC Australia. Recently, which I had to listen to. I think you've listened to. I mean, she goes into all the details. We've mentioned this in the previous podcast.
Yeah. So if you don't know, Kirsty Miller is a trans woman, sportswoman, Australian.
Yeah, very well. She was top in her category. I think she was most successful in that particular sport. Yeah.
And she writes really well about this because she's she's well researched. So the way, obviously, Neil Fox.
Neil Fox. So what do we know about Neil Fox?
He used to be a Radio 1 DJ. That's all I know about him.
Where does Dr. Fox come from?
Maybe he has got a doctorate in medicine. I don't know. A bit like Dr. Dre. He's got a PhD in something. I don't know.
I don't know anything about him. Never really.
Well, I used to be one of them Radio 1s, kind of like cheesy DJs that they got rid of in the 90s because they realised they were all just cringe. But anyway, apart from that, that's all I know.
Right, well, here he is. He's there he is in the background.
With his big opinion.
With his big opinion, yeah.
Yeah.
So, are you ready to go? Should we...
Let's roll.
I shall pause it at the appropriate moments and we'll have a chat about what they're saying. So I think part A is Neil Fox talking with Sharron Davies, and this goes on for about 4 or 5 minutes, and I'll pause it at the appropriate point so we can have a discussion. Yeah. All right, so here we go.
Right then, as sport continues to struggle with the transgender row, the British Triathlon Federation's new policy for an open category came into force today. The sport's going to be divided into 2 categories for athletes over the age of 12. There'll be a female category for those who are assigned the female sex at birth, and an open category, or in simple terms, all individuals, including male, transgender, and those non-binary who are male sex at birth.
So straight out of the box there, this is how they're defining this category. So it's like one category for female at birth and the other category for everybody else.
Yeah.
So the first thing that comes to my mind is, okay, so that means that in the category for everybody else, you're going to have trans men, trans women, and cis men.
Yeah.
So the trans men will be taking hormones.
Yeah.
The cis men won't need to, and the trans women will have suppressed their hormones. So does that sound fair?
It sounds like a nonsense because, but the thing is, there's no way there's going to be enough people in this category that is an unfair category within a category.
Yeah, and then non-binary people as well in there.
And it's a way to avoid. It's not about avoiding the issue, but it's a way to kind of divert the issue to say, look, we're doing something about it. Stop pestering us.
It's like they've said, okay, the female category is going to be like the pure category, and we're going to segregate everybody else into this other category, which includes all kinds of different people and different hormone levels. Yeah. And somehow this is fair. I don't know how that works.
So really what they've done is they've said there's one category where we exclude people and one category where we can include people. So what some cis women could do is say, well, we want to join that category. Why can't we all be in this category? Because that could be a realistic option. They could say, well, I identify into this category. I'm suddenly now, because I want to promote inclusion, I'm non-binary. That would be the protest to have.
A cis woman could decide that they want to go in the other category. They could come out as non-binary and go in the other category, but you wouldn't be able to go the other way.
But the thing that strikes me is they've done this and they've done it to try and be inclusive, but they've actually done the opposite.
Yeah,
and it doesn't help anyone.
They're kind of saying that a trans woman who's suppressed her testosterone levels, they're assuming that has had no effect on the performance level. Whereas if you listen to Kirsty Miller, she'll tell you that that has a significant effect on performance level.
Well, there's this.
I'm sure certain things may be retained, like your height and your length of your arms and legs doesn't change, but your muscle mass does change. The way your hemoglobin gets transferred around your body changes. I guess it's down to the nitty gritty of the science.
Well, with this triathlon event thing, because I don't know at what level you're talking. Like, is this like, how much training do you have to do prior to entering something like this? See, this is why I'm not.
Well, an elite level. It's a lot of training. So
this is not something that like you could just say, right, I'm going to do this next year. I'm going to train for this.
I don't think so.
No, so you'd already have to have been in sport. You'd have already have to have been in a category. And is it likely that they're going to get people who apply for this? Because I know, I know, knowing what I know about trans, non-binary athletes, they wouldn't want to be in this category because it's a segregated category, and it makes them the other thing, like the exotic thing that, they want to compete based on what they identify as. The non-binary thing, maybe, I don't know. These are very vague, and then they're fluid. They're all.
I kind of wonder about the number of people in this new category. There's going to be a lot of people in that category. Compared to the cis female category, they're going to be a completely different size, aren't they? Based on that. Anyway, so let's carry on.
British Triathlon said the new approach follows on from a survey of over 3,000 members that found 80% are in support of the changes. Meanwhile, in last week, the World Boxing Council have announced they will introduce a transgender category for fighters, separate to the men's and women's categories.
So once again, this is boxing now, a different sport. A separate category just for transgender people. So I don't know how many transgender boxers there are, but are they going to be able to set up a league? Are there enough transgender boxers? And does that separate league? Would you have to have two, one for trans men, one for trans women?
Well, yeah, because you couldn't.
So it's two more leagues, and then the numbers of boxers that there are in the world who would fit into that category. I don't think you'd have enough to form a league. You and I could start boxing, and we'd be the only people in it, and we'd win. Yeah.
I'd definitely beat you, Vicky. Be on the floor. Anyway,
I don't think they quite thought that through.
You can put bets on at the end of this, and me and Vicky will have a little fight, and then we can cash out. No, anyway, seriously though, I did look online to see if there are a couple of trans male boxers, and I'm thinking, did they need to be in separate categories? Because there's just not enough. There's this narrative like trans people are taking over sport and ruining it. For everybody.
And how well are those two boxers doing? Are they winning everything?
And one case that the anti-trans lobby always bring up is the case of Freda Wallace. Now they're failing there, because this is how Joe Rogan, the famous raw meat eating podcaster, got into the trans debate. It was through this, I think, and he was noticing that Fallon Fox was winning a lot and bashing and doing some damage, right, to certain components. Now the thing is with that MMA, kickboxing, fighting, it's a very unregulated, it's a very money-led world. It's a very it's not a safe sport at all. It's not, there's and that is a situation. So people are promoting Fallon Fox because there's money to be made. It's a systemic thing, and that's a factor in that. So why nobody's going to turn around and say, yeah, well, that should be allowed because you can't discriminate against trans. If you notice something is wrong, then I think that's fair enough, right? But where it's coming from a bad place is where you're suggesting that trans people are taking over something like it's.
But where would you put Fallon Fox in if you couldn't put them in the men's?
That's the thing. It's just something that I don't have the expertise and I don't have the insight in a sporting arena. You'd have to look at it. Yeah. You have to look at individuals. We're not looking at trans people. We're looking at actual individuals that have a specific skill or talent or whatever it is. This is not something it's not trans people like suddenly changing sport and making it unfair. That's not happening. Well, that's the sort of backstory with a lot of these tabloid stories. But so yeah, I think if you're gonna start segregating, and it is a rocky road that, because what is sport for really? It's celebrating human endeavour. It's about
and it's not as simplistic as they're trying to make out in this argument at all. It's much more complicated.
No, because they mention biological a lot, and they'll use that, and it's like, well, that's not easily defined either. It's not the idea of a biological female. What does that actually come down to? And I don't know if that's a scientific term. Is it really? Is that something that is written down, like this is what a biological woman is, and there's a list of attributes, and so it is one of the trans, the discussions we have with people who are transphobic, where there are these nuances, and we have to say, look, we don't just because we're trans, we don't advocate for people being damaged or being put with opponents who are definitely going to harm them. That's not what we stand for. It's just that you're coming to us with this debate, which we are kind of forced along to have. We're not experts in any of this. We're just kind of, I'm interested in why the debate exists now, and what it's being used for, because it's what I've said before about performative arguments. It's not the subject matter itself that is being discussed. It's the argument. It's what you're on the soapbox for. So it's performing a kind of to make a case, a moral case against trans people. That's the difference.
All right, let's hear Sharron. I think she's about to come on.
Now, to discuss this, I'm joined by former Olympic swimmer and television presenter Sharron Davies. So welcome along. Happy New Year, Sharron. Is this the right move? It sounds a lot more inclusive and fair to me. Good?
Yes, good. I mean, well, triathlon have been leading the way really in this country with setting that policy. They announced that they were going to do that the middle of last year. And it's a very fair policy. You know, this is about protecting the female category, but creating an opportunity for everyone to be involved in sport. So that's why we have the open category. You mentioned transgender women, so that is people that are biologically male, but also enables people that are biologically female that are on testosterone who wouldn't be allowed to compete in the female category because that would break the rules to be able to compete as well. So this is enabling everyone to be able to compete, but it's also enabling females to still have fair sport, which is what I've always been fighting for.
Well, I'm sure, because, of course, there was the big story around last year, Leah Thomas, the University of Pennsylvania swimmer, who, of course, had transitioned from a man and was just an incredible swimmer and just won everything. And then the weightlifter as well. We had these two really stark cases that proved in a way how things needed to change, however tricky the situation was and however inclusive any governing body was trying to be. Clearly they needed to do some, I guess, lines in the sand and just say, look, we need to make some rules here. And this does seem, I hate to say, like common sense has prevailed.
So they kind of set the whole scene up as a, you know, like it's a preordained question situation there, where it's kind of like a leading question.
Well, it's totally loaded.
It's loaded and it's leading.
When he said common sense at the end, I mean, it's like when somebody says common sense, my brain just goes like back to Stuart Lee. You know, it's like, don't ask the man on the street what he thinks. You know what I mean?
But the way he started it, it's like, this is good news, isn't it, Sharron? It's like,
yeah,
you're like prompting her to say, yes, it's good news. It's
yeah,
like,
because well, she's going to think it's, but she's being quite moderate here to what she has been on Twitter, and we know because she's involved in the lobbying against, you know, if this isn't just about sport for Sharron, it's, I think, because she was called out quite early on. And what tends to happen is these people, instead of saying, look, maybe I made a mistake there, I said the wrong thing, I didn't mean to offend anybody, they double down. And sometimes because there is a very aggressive front, sometimes it seems to them like a very aggressive front of trans allies that say, right, what you're saying here, no, you can't say that. And some people are just really nasty, obviously, because they're just kind of standing up for something. They think they're standing up for in the right way, but it can come across to people like Sharron Davies like they're being bullied. They're not really being bullied. They're just being called out, and they end up doubling down. And then somebody like J.K. Rowling will see that and boost that post. And that's how you get these kind of, popular accounts like Sharron Davies, Maya Forstarter, Alison Bailey, Kathleen Stock. The list goes on. And the reason is because they all share this same thing where they've been called out. And rather than say, maybe, we can have a discussion and a debate about it, no, they double down and they throw in and they dig their heels in. And then it becomes a nonsensical debate then, because you've gone past the point of having that debate. So
okay,
Sharron,
let's continue with Sharron's reply here.
Yeah, I mean, that is what we've been after all along, really, is basically using the science. So there's 17 peer-reviewed science reports in the world, the last just before Christmas, which shows that we cannot remove male puberty advantage. Now, in Olympic sport, that's anywhere from about 10% to weightlifting at 30%.
No, I'm not sure that's quite true. I don't know
where she's getting these stats.
I don't know where she's getting those stats or those numbers
she said
from.
Just before Christmas, I was handed a present from J.K. Rowling, which said, "You've got to say this on the telly."
That kind of contradicts what Kirsty Miller says. If you listen to the reports that she quotes, so
we know that cross-sex hormones, estrogen, testosterone blockers are going to change.
Yeah,
and that is a matter of fact, right? So if
when a trans woman starts on HRT and uses a testosterone blocker as well, your performance level, your testosterone level drops significantly to probably like 0.3 or 4. It's way down there, and that comes with performance loss, muscle loss, etc. And I don't know what Sharron's quoting here, but it sounds like she's cherry picking reports.
Yeah, well, she's obviously. I mean, the thing with reports and the thing with this kind of you can cherry pick and you can find the information that suits your bias, which we do. You know, we do that too.
I think everybody's guilty of that.
Yeah, but what I will say is, if we were to put our information together, which is what the kind of idea would be, like let's say, okay, we want to have a fair debate. Let's bring all the information together, but we know that there are certain lobby groups that will pay for research, and that is
research
where it gets skewed.
Where they've already determined the outcome before they've done the research.
Yeah, because we've seen this happen.
We're paying you for this research to produce this result. I mean, that's the kind of thing they do.
Yeah, well, they might not explicitly say that, but if you go to a company that does, you know, testing and things like that, you can pay them, and
you can use the results to prove the point that you want it to prove. You know, it's.
Yeah, but it's kind of a dichotomy that they have, because on one hand, you know, if anti-trans people will say, "Oh, trans women are men, so they're brutes and they're aggressive and we're masculine," and then when it comes to the sports argument, it's like, well, you know, if you look at the actual facts of it, then it just doesn't make sense, because we would be winning everything, wouldn't we? If it was the case that trans women could enter a sport that they wanted to divide and they just won it outright, we'd see that pattern.
Yeah,
but we
would.
don't see that pattern. Even in the few trans women that there are, which you'd probably count on your hands, that are competing at an international professional level, you don't see those massive wins.
No, you don't. Yeah. All right, let's continue here.
It's something like boxing, a male and a female of equal weight. So this isn't someone bigger or stronger. This is someone of equal weight and height and size. A male will hit 160% harder onto a female structure, which actually is more fragile. Our bone structure is more fragile. So it's incredibly dangerous in something like a contact sport and in boxing, rowing, rugby, any of those contact sports are going to be incredibly dangerous. So it's really important that we put safety first, then we put fairness, and then we make sure we come up with ways to be inclusive, because it really is important that everyone can do sport.
It is, and this for anyone that obviously is transitioning, it's obviously a hugely emotional time for them. Obviously, by the time they get to be competing like this, they will have transitioned and will have had to have done so for, I think, 3 years is what the IOC is saying. But of course, it has to be fair, because people, I was going to say people like yourselves have trained all your life to do a certain sport, and then maybe if the rules had stood and not changed, there would have been no chance, maybe. The second may have been the best you could have done.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. You know, you say 3 years. I mean, actually, in lots of sports, it's way less than that. And at the NC2As, when you mentioned Leah Thomas, it was a year. And that was to reduce your testosterone levels from male levels of testosterone to 10 nanomoles of testosterone per litre. I have less than 1. Most females have less than 1.
I have 0.2.
Yeah, I don't know what I have. I can't find the stats. But I was going to say, it's this thing now. The narrative is that there's a threat, that it's a safety issue, it's a fairness issue. Yeah, fairness comes into it. But it's like, are we going to sit here and say that sport is going to be fair if you eliminate trans women from it or trans men from it? Because we know that there are a lot of factors that make sport fair or not. And
well, can you imagine a sport where, you know, everybody was identical?
Yeah.
Nobody would ever win.
Yeah, I mean, it's this idea, like the idea of creating separate categories for trans feels like it's saying it's some kind of. Is it because they think we're a threat, or is it because they think we're a disability? Because there's two ways it comes to my mind, and I think in either way, I don't know. I mean, people have had these thought experiments where they said, right, if you just let girls and boys play together as mixed from a very early age, what would be the outcomes? Now, would boys still excel? But there would be a different parity, because I know that when I was at school, boys were pretty much forced to play football from the age 6 or whatever. Yeah. So if you were going to be good at football, you were going to be spotted very early on, and people would say, oh, this lad is really good, you know, you need to invest some money in this lad, and he'd go to an academy, and one of those lads maybe would be a brilliant football player. But the girls weren't getting that, right? So that's an unfairness in sport. That's disparity in sport. That's a social reality, and that's got nothing to do with. It's to do with gender, but it's also to do with society, the way society is structured. So when we say, when somebody like Sharron Davies will say, well, trans women are it's this idea that we're taking over sports and ruining sports. It's not that. The bigger picture is, if we wanted to look at what is causing disparity or causing unfairness in sport, why concentrate on the trans issue when it's more of a systemic, misogynistic problem? It always comes down to that.
Yeah, I mean, look at the time it's taken for women's football to get to the stage it's at now. I mean, they still don't get the same money, they don't get the same time, they don't have their own stadiums, even though they've just won the Euros last year. It's nowhere near the same level as the men's football.
Well, that's why I always say I'm not an expert in sport in this debate. My interest in this debate is why it is constructed around. Can you
imagine how popular a trans league would be? How long would it take that to? You'd never see it on TV, would you? It would never happen.
Well, you'd probably not get enough people.
You'd never get enough people to be in it. I mean, you've got to make a football team of 22 trans people now. So.
I tried to start a darts team. It didn't happen. Nobody people aren't.
So if you need let's say you applied this to football, you'd need 20 teams of 22 players each. With all the extras you need. You never do it. It's impossible.
But on a serious point though about women's bodies and this idea, because there is the issue of when girls go through puberty, it's that change that's going to affect your sporting career. Say if you were a really nimble, accomplished gymnast some of these gymnasts are 13, 14 years old. Now, I don't know, a girl's body is going to could change massively in 3 or 4 or 5 years. So that is something that affects women in sport. That is an actual fact, that it affects women differently than it does men, right? We're not going to get away from that.
Yep.
But to say it's the fault of the trans people that there's unfairness in sport is it's just like ignoring everything else. It's like you're concentrating on something which allows you to ignore everything else.
Yeah, I think your first kind of position should be, we need to make this inclusive as possible. That should be your starting point. Let's try and do proper full inclusion. Rather than looking at it from this kind of the way they're talking now around. Well, let's do it the other way around. Let's just exclude them because we don't know.
Yeah. It's like it's sort of a fail. We don't know anything about it, so sod it.
So we'll just exclude, because it's easy, and everybody does agree with us, but it doesn't really. It does nothing for inclusion.
And for a lot of young people as well who would be watching this, like I said before, I mentioned it in a bit, but I think sport is about social things. It's about confidence building. It's about mental health. It's about better mental health. And I think if you was trans and you suddenly saw you were being, people in your peer group were being excluded, or you saw some sporting hero, you might have been Emily Bridges. You might look at her and as a young trans person go, oh my God, that's my hero. And then suddenly you find out she's excluded. And how is that going to make you feel?
Exactly.
So you've got to think about that. You've got to think about how it filters down to the amateur level.
And there's a huge difference between elite sports and your local community sports.
Yeah, I know. I understand that. But the point, I understand that point, but because I'm thinking it in a more holistic way, because I'm not a sports scientist, obviously. I'm just some somebody with a big gob on YouTube at the moment. But you know what I mean? I think about it as a trans person who is outside of the debate in a way.
All right,
I'm dragged into the debate.
Let's get to the end of part 1 here.
So, that was 10 times the average female, and they were still allowed to compete, and they only had to do that for a year. The last study that came out pre-Christmas showed that it doesn't really matter. If you carry on training, if you suppress your testosterone, a male will lose very little strength. So it's just an unfair situation, and women have worked so hard to get, some form of equality in sport. We still don't have that. We're still a very long way away from what males have in sport, but we are gradually getting there. And this was definitely going to put us back. So this isn't about, anyone being transphobic or anyone not believing that sport is for everybody. This was about saying that biological females, which is half of the world, deserve the right to equal opportunities of success in sport. And let's find better solutions. Let's find better ways. And female and open seems to be the best. But the World Boxing Council also announced just on Thursday that they're going to introduce a transgender league. Now, I'm all for that as well. You know, if that's a way forward that transgender athletes would like it to be, then let's support that too. And let's make the federations work with transgender groups of people and athletes to find things that will work for them.
Now, you came in for an awful lot of stick, didn't you, before, for your views? Why do you think that is? And do you think actually that has it calmed down? I hope it has for you. And do you think this will help calm things down in general?
No.
Yeah, it has. I mean, I think FINA, the World Aquatics Federation, making their stance and deciding that they were going to protect female sport helped a great deal. That was off the back of what they could see happening with Leah. What I didn't want to happen was that for us to have a Leah in every single sport before people did what they already know. You know, we have two categories at the Olympic Games, males and females, for a reason. If we didn't have that, women wouldn't win events. It would be all won by men. So that is why we have it in the first place. And to say that there's no difference and testosterone makes no difference is actually ridiculous, you know? So let's be honest, let's work with the science and let's come up with really good solutions. Things have definitely got better. I still get massive pile-ons every once in a while, but, you know, I've only ever wanted to work with the science and I've only ever wanted there to be fair sport for everybody. And I think when there is fair sport for men, there should be fair sport for women. But I mean, let me give you a ridiculous example of what's going on at the moment in USA Rowing, for example. So USA Rowing have turned around and said in the women's category, anyone can identify as a woman and compete. But when it comes to the mixed relays, in other words, when there's supposed to be 2 women and 2 men, only biological females can take part because it will affect men. Now, you tell me how that is fair.
Well, look, we're going to continue this discussion in just a moment. But for the moment, Sharron, thanks for joining us. And
yeah, so that's the end of part 1.
So yeah, no, what she's doing there, she's imagining in this world where, you know, imagining a fictitious world where trans women are everywhere. She can't escape them. They're jumping in the pool when she's trying to swim. It's like, Sharron, you know, be realistic. You know, you can see you can see that she's totally gone down this paranoid rabbit hole that is promoted by the likes of Sex Matters and LGBA and Woman's Place and all those other lobby groups. They're lobby groups, really. They've got nothing to do with promoting female sports or defending the rights of women. It's about excluding trans women. That's their main driver. And they found a niche for it because there are enough people that will be, you know, drawn along a line, drawn over the fence and think, oh, God, yeah, it will be unfair, won't it? Because if men can get into women's sports...
Because they kind of follow that simplistic logic and it sounds reasonable, but when you look into the details, it's not. It's different.
Well, that's the problem. Any complicated... it is a complicated issue. And like I say, you know, I don't know if there is a simple, easy way to say, you know, right... Because I would worry, like now,
you know, each sporting body, you know, it's kind of left up to them to decide how they're going to handle this issue.
Yeah, there can't be one dogmatic.
And there's been a lot of organisations coming out and putting this kind of trans women can't play in this sport at the moment, especially in the States. I mean, this has been happening quite a lot recently. It's kind of a reaction to what's going on in the kind of political world. I don't think we'd be talking about trans women in sports had the politics not been going in that direction too. There is no problem in sports. It's born out of, you know, all the rhetoric we're hearing around trans people in politics. So, you know, I mean, that's kind of the root cause of it, I think. There's been no cases of trans people suddenly being successful in sport and taking all the prizes. That's just not happened. So the only other place it can come from, you know, is kind of like the political anti-trans rhetoric that's going on in the States and the UK at the moment.
I mean, it's always worries me. Like when I hear about a trans athlete and I hear there's going to be some competition, I know what the discourse is going to be like on Twitter. It's not going to be pretty.
No.
And I worry about that. I hope that them athletes are protected from that because they would not be able to achieve, they would not be able to concentrate, and they would not be able to have a good time or feel accomplished at all.
I mean, you can imagine the stress that trans athletes have to go through with all this media attention.
And then you called it cheat on top of all that.
And they're being called cheats as well. Yeah.
And even you've got to say, like somebody like Emily Bridges, but I mentioned the cyclist, like she trained and she was she cycled as male. Fair enough, I can see why some people would say because when I was talking to people, other people that aren't entrenched as much in this debate as we are, I explained the situation and I can see them sort of nodding along when I say she used to be male and she transitioned and the point is
she followed all the rules that she was told to follow and over the correct period of time and everything. And then right at the last minute, they changed the rules on her before she was about to race. I mean, talk about unfairness.
That is unfair. And what is Emily supposed to do? Like, so she has a choice then, doesn't she? She said, right, I'm not going to cycle ever again, apart from just for my own personal pleasure, or I face this barrage of constant hate.
It would be very easy to walk away at that point.
And I'll tell you where that hate is coming from. It's coming from people like Sharron Davies' account, because she has encouraged that kind of behaviour. She's very moderate in this TV appearance. But I've seen the things people have commented some really abhorrent things under Sharron Davies' posts. Now, when people like that don't look at that and go, oh, gosh, maybe I've gone too far here. Maybe I should call this out. When they ignore,
or delete those tweets.
Yeah, when they don't call that out, and when they just say, "Oh, that's just Twitter. It doesn't matter." Well, it does matter because that's where your debate is, and that's why it's on GB News. And that's the only reason. It's got nothing to do with helping anybody or parity or fairness or, protecting women's sports. It's got nothing to do with that. The whole driver for it is transphobia. And we know that because it's demonstrated every day on the account. I mean, if you just look at any of Sharron Davies' posts, and you can see keep prison single sex. You'll see
issues nothing to do with sports.
Yeah, of course, all the usual issues to do. They like all the performative arguments that I always talk about. Are in there as well in a mix in that soup. Yes. And the only motivator is the exclusion of trans women, not just from sport but from life.
From life. That's
where it leads.
Ourselves from life. Let's move to Mars. So part 2 will be featuring Miss Freda Wallace. Are you
Not
ready?
her again.
Her again. On the telly again. You ready?
Yeah.
Okay,
go on.
There we go.
And I wish you a happy new year. Really appreciate that. Let's bring in former boxing promoter Kellie Maloney and gender nebulous podcast presenter Freda Wallace. So, Freda, welcome along and a very happy new year. And also, as well, Kellie, how do you feel about these new rules? Do you feel they are fair?
Is that to me?
Yes, sorry, Freda. Yes, it is.
Well, I don't come to this as a sports person. I'm quite willing to listen to Sharron talking about we should follow the science, because I don't follow that kind of. What's interesting to me about this debate is why it's happening now, and there's this kind of. And Sharron has thrown in with some quite transphobic people on Twitter, and that's just a matter of fact. And there's this kind of invasion narrative that trans women are taking over sports and it's going to be a problem. It really isn't. You can name them on one hand, maybe, the trans women that are making waves in sport. And also, this isn't a new thing. This goes back to like 1976 when Renee Richards, she was in the US Tennis Open and she played as a trans woman. It didn't create the kind of hysteria that it does now. The reason these things are creating these waves now is because we live in a culture war climate. So somebody like me is seen as the other. You can criticize me based on my otherness. And that's the problem I have with it. I'm all for fairness in sport because it wouldn't make sense if somebody was winning everything. Like if I started... I'm not a sports person, but say if I entered a sports category, I do a bit of swimming and I just started winning everything, how would that benefit me? Because I'm like some kind of, there's no sort of trans superwoman that's winning everything. That's not happening. So I'm not sure
there was the case of Leah Thomas, and I suppose it highlighted...
She wasn't winning everything, Neil.
She wasn't, but it highlighted a problem, I guess, and it was a problem that was like, OK, maybe we need to try and be fair to everyone and inclusive for everyone, but how do we do that so that if you happen to be that person against Leah and you felt it was incredibly unfair, that you'd trained all your life for that moment. I know, because the numbers obviously clearly, as you quite rightly say, are very small, but we're just trying to make it fair. I mean, do you think the specific one, for example, and the reason we're talking about it today is, of course, because the rules have come into effect today. So say for British triathlon, there is this open category. Does that seem like common sense to you? Actually, can I bring in you, Kellie? What do you think?
So I didn't know, Freda, that you're not a sports person. That's news to me.
I know. Yeah, I kept that secret, didn't I?
You did, yeah. Yeah.
I've been doing cross-country running on Sundays after the podcast. I mean, I do like sport.
Maybe we should be sports people, because we could probably lose a bit of weight. It might help.
My thing that I really like doing was sea swimming, because I used to go to the Isle of Man, right? And they do a competition where you can swim around. There's a beach at Peel Harbour, and and Peel Castle, and it's like a bit of an outcrop, and they just do like a competition where you swim around this little outcrop, and anyone can enter. It's not like nobody cares how anybody identifies. It's just, let's see who gets to the end first. So that's about as far as my sporting. Yeah. But I was thinking, if I was, because it comes down to this, let's just go back a bit, because I've just lost the train of thought there. So if I wanted to go swimming, there are two things they have to worry about there now, aren't there? Because where do I get changed? Because there are the same people like Sharron Davies are also batting for this idea. I shouldn't be in female changing. I shouldn't be in female changing spaces. Yeah. And then if I go in the sea, I mean, am I invading women's sea? I don't know. Am I invading some kind of? Am I invading the ocean now? So I am. I mean, I have been swimming with a friend of mine, a cis female friend, and it's like, it doesn't make any sense to go in a male changing room. Why do we go in a male changing room and be split up from my friend? Nobody should be looking at anybody's bodies in that way. Anyway, side issue, obviously, but I think I made the point I wanted to make there. But I wanted to make these points to Sharron. Yeah,
well, it didn't work out like that.
No, because she doesn't want to face criticism. I just don't think she wants to have a debate. I just think she has talking points and she wants to deliver them and go. Yeah. She doesn't want to have a debate, and because she knows the debate I want to have is not about sport. It's about her conduct within the debate. That's what I wanted to talk to her about. No, I mean, I fully respect her as a sportswoman. I think she's great. I think if you're an Olympic athlete, that is worthy of all the respect in the world, right? Not interested in that. I'm interested in why you're a transphobe, and that's the matter. That's the fact of the matter.
All right, let's continue.
Well, I am from the sporting world, and I do believe in fair play and safety first in sport. But you talk about the swimmer. She only won one race. She was in about 8 races that day, and she didn't break any records like you like to say she did. And the New Zealand weightlifter absolutely didn't even qualify after the first round. You have to remember, sport's not just about the physical side, it's also about the mental side. And a trans person goes through a hell of a lot of stuff to get to where they are today, and it affects them mentally. Yep. I agree with the WBC's rules, what they've come up with. I think that's very good, because that is a sport that you have to have first-class safety. But I think, we'll see how the triathlon thing goes. The WBC have obviously set a precedent by setting a trans category, so it's led the way for other sports to follow. It's more of a political decision than a sports decision. Mm-hmm. But I totally agree. Trans women should not be allowed to box biological women in any form of combat sports. But
now, I'm not quite sure where that last comment comes from.
I agree with the first bit of that, but when she started saying biological,
that's assuming that the trans woman has not lost any performance. I mean,
that's Kellie's opinion. Kellie's opinion. But I don't know if it's based in any actual science. Opinion.
I'm not sure.
Right, because when you read Kirsty Miller on that, you'll discover that it's a lot more complex.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Okay,
we have mentioned Kirsty a lot, but the reason is she is really good on this as a trans person.
I highly recommend you go listen to the radio show.
So I don't. While I respect Kellie's, because she is coming from a boxing world, and she trained boxers, so she obviously knows a lot more about that side of it than I ever will. Yeah. But don't think she's coming from a scientific point of view there. I think she's coming from an emotionally, safety,
I mean, for a trans woman, how much performance loss do they have during transition? I mean, Sharron Davies was saying before that a trans woman can hit 160% harder.
Well, is that true? I don't know.
Is that true? That might be true pre-transition, but is it true post-transition? I don't know.
But in a segment like this on the news, I've got no way of fact checking.
People are firing out facts and or numbers, but there's no kind of where's the evidence?
Well, yeah, but even so, even if you we are debating the minutiae of something that we don't understand. Like, we don't have to be sports scientists to know that the real reason, like I said, this debate exists here is about, because it's the trans bit is the reason. It's not about fairness. It's not about anything else. It's because they want to talk about trans. And the agenda, really, with GB News and with Talk TV and with Times Radio sometimes and LBC, is they have this kind of talking points that they know are algorithmically rewarding, and the advertisers know that. So there'll certain words that appear in Twitter feeds and certain words that are appearing in websites that get the click rate clicking up.
Manufactured panic.
Well, yeah, there's that, and it's been the same for years in any tabloid newspaper. People are attracted to the idea of something that this is all very frightening.
Yeah, let's carry on.
Other sport, I think we have to look at. I listen to Sharron Davies, and I respect Sharon's views, and she's entitled to her opinion, same as we are. But we need more evidence. I work with sports physiologists, and I've got one who's told me, you have a slight advantage, but it depends on how far you are in your transitioning. Yep. I know my testosterone level is near enough as low as what Sharon said hers is, because I have my bloods and my testing done every 6 months.
Okay. One thing I'd like to ask, because I guess what is good about this is we can sit down this and we can debate it sensibly and rationally. Sometimes on social media, these things get out of control because it just becomes name calling.
I'm not sure it's sensible and rational, but anyway.
No. It's. What was she saying there? That she about testosterone. I don't think it's just about testosterone levels and things like that. I mean, I know these things, but athletes are checked for lots of things, and it's not just testosterone levels.
No, it's not just testosterone.
It's all sorts of things. Most athletes, they find levels of cocaine in them, don't they?
What about? I'm sure. What about the amount of training you do? That has a huge impact too. I'm sure. Yeah,
if you're a dedicated. If it was just about hormone levels, then just people who had more testosterone would win everything. Maybe.
Yeah, no, they don't do anything else. They just have more testosterone. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's a very simplistic.
It is very simplistic.
But let's just be fair to Kelly. This is a very simplistic setup. She's not come on with a book of stats and facts. And I'm sure if she was to sit down in a real one-to-one situation, she'd be able to tell you loads about boxing stats and all this kind of stuff. But this isn't the place it's happening.
No. We need to remember we're on GB News here.
But if we can sit down and rationally and talk about these to make sure all parties feel happy. Freda, can I ask you, as a member of the trans community, do you think, how are they reacting to this new policy, say, for triathlon? Do they feel that this feels fair? Does it feel like common sense at play?
Well, no. It doesn't feel fair because it seems like segregation, and it feels like, well, if I was a sports person, I'm forced to play with men, and I don't have I don't want this to trickle down to the amateur level. I wouldn't want somebody who is trans to suddenly think they can't be involved in sports, because sport is not just about pure science and physicality. It's about striving, being the best person you can be, and being and overcoming things. And I think trans people relate to that because in their daily lives. So when we look at sporting heroes, we're not looking at the stats. We're looking at this person is a great example of somebody that's fought for what they wanted to achieve in life. And I think there's another layer to the sporting story. So I can understand Sharron Davies saying we have to look at the science, because there is a sports science But it's like I was thinking about, the women's Euros, the Lionesses.
Yep.
If you look at the parity, there were 32-year-old women on the same field as 17-year-olds. 18-year-olds. And I was thinking, well, if you're going to talk about parity, you can't cherry pick. You've got to, if you had to look at sport completely in the sense of science and parity, Sharron Davies wouldn't be allowed to compete because how tall is she? You know what I mean? It's like you'd have to say, well, you're too physically big to be a swimmer because you're going to win everything.
Now,
that was just very simplistic. I mean,
I thought you liked playing with men anyway.
Yeah, let's gloss over that.
Okay. And you're actually, it was quite amusing there because you're actually interrupting yourself.
Yeah. I just want to, I'll interrupt anybody, even myself. What was I going to say? I did go off on a bit of a brain rot there because I don't want to appear that I'm saying that Sharron only won because she's a tall woman. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is I respect her as an athlete, but the problem I have with her is that she's looking at trans women's bodies and looking at trans women's levels of this and levels of that. Let's have a look at yours, love. Let's see how fair how you get on. If
that's a good point.
If we examine you in the same way you're going to scrutinize a trans swimmer.
That's a very good point.
Let's put you on the podium, stood next to another woman, and see how much taller you are. How big your hands are? They like spades.
Yeah, because there's a lot of variation within, the sexes, isn't there?
Yeah, and I was talking about the women's FIFA Euros.
Yeah.
The Lionesses, because I don't know about there was Hedvig Lindahl, and she was the player I was talking about that's 39 now, and potentially I don't know if they did play on the same field because they may have been knocked out in different parts of the tournament, but they could have potentially been playing together. And the other one, the other player I was going to mention was Esme Brooks, and she's 19 now. So a 39-year-old and a 19-year-old, who would have been a year younger, obviously, last year. But
yeah, I mean their ability level is completely different.
So are we going to look at that and
maybe that difference is bigger than the difference between somebody who's cis female and trans female.
Yeah. So that's the point. But that point is a very tangential one to the bigger one I want to make, which is always that this debate only exists because they want to talk about trans as a problem. We're not we're not like would they have a story if Leah Thomas, would they have Leah Thomas on and a celebrated swimmer Leah Thomas? No, the story would be trans ruiner of women's swimming, Leah Thomas. That would be nobody would be celebrating.
It wouldn't be celebrated, no.
Right,
I think you'd finish ranting here, but let's just check.
Do you know what I mean? So you can't do that.
I think that's rather different, isn't it? I have to say. And Kelly, what do you feel about what Freda said there? As someone who's been involved in sport,
I agree with your view on that. Sport is sport. We have categories in sport. And someone, you do get tall women, you do get smaller women, you do get taller men. You take heavyweight boxing. Yeah, Lennox Lewis, who I looked after, he was 6'6" and nearly 17.5 stone. He could fight someone that was 13.5 stone 14 stone and maybe 6 foot. That's just all human bodies are different. But sport has to be
that's kind of what I was saying. Sorry, my point of view is because there's
no such thing as a level playing field in sport. That's referring to Sharron Davies has got quite big shoulders. She is a very powerful woman, and she's a good swimmer. But she has trained for that. You have to remember, sports people train for all their life, and it's also, as I said earlier, it's a mental thing as well with sport. You drive yourself on to achieve something, and we have opposite sides. We have scientists who say there is no advantage. We need the scientists to get around the table and discuss this fairly.
Yeah.
We can't use the trans community as a football to be kicked about by, say, right-wing politicians, anti-trans people. I'm all for sitting around a table and talking and discussing. And whatever comes out right, if the science comes out right, which Sharron says, 100%, then we go with that. If the science comes out right that trans women don't have an advantage, then we should go with that.
Kellie,
I agree with that last point that Kellie made there.
Yeah, but this idea of sitting around a table, if you want to do that, you can't do it with Sharron Davies because she's already thrown in with the anti-trans lobby. You can't have it. If you want to have this,
well, let's bring in the professional medics and scientists and let them.
It's got to come from that. And even this is too simplistic because it's like Kellie's saying there. Let's find out what the science is. There's never going to be a day when some scientist turns up and go, right, we've figured it out now. It's not going to happen. You're just going to have to deal with the fact that human beings.
Hang on, there's a call coming in. Oh no,
it's
the wrong number.
No, you just got. Human beings are diverse. Some of us are, powerful and predisposed to being athletes, and some of us won't. Most of us won't, and we'll just be like me, who just eats a lot of chips.
I think during that last bit there, we had Freda interrupting Neil, interrupting Kellie, and then you were interrupting everybody. It was like,
I know it's meta.
That was like, what's going on here?
Well, that's what I was trying to do because I thought you're always criticising me
It's
for
like
interrupting.
four levels of interruption. Yeah.
It was a sandwich.
So we're very close to the end here. Let me just finish it off, and then we'll come back. 1 sec.
Thank you. And it's been very interesting hearing all your thoughts tonight and Sharron's as well. And this is something that isn't going to be sorted out today for sure, but at least discussions have started and moves have been made. Thank you. Freda, thank you very much. Kellie, thank you very much. I wish you both a very happy new year. That'd be a good start, wouldn't it?
So there we go. That's it.
So, I mean, I made the points I wanted to make, but like I said, I was really disappointed I couldn't make them to Sharron. Because, I have nothing... I wouldn't have been rude to Sharron. It's just that you can't ignore what's going on her Twitter feed and how she's using Twitter as a kind of weapon in a way, in a kind of lobbying for. Because she says she's interested in. She keeps saying she's interested in fairness for women in sport, but what is she actually doing, really? Is she funding grassroots sports for young girls? Is she doing that? Is she? Because I don't know, she might be. Somebody correct me if I'm wrong, but
I'm not sure.
I don't see any evidence for it. All I see constantly is this trans. If you go to her Twitter now and type in a search for the keyword trans, you'll see about 500 posts. If you search for grassroots girls or inclusion in sport for girls, you'll find nothing. You might find a few.
And you'll see
and all the other links will be sex matters, fair play for women, J.K. Rowling, obviously, all that, and it's all part of this same thing on Twitter. So maybe take it off Twitter, but I don't know. But that was the point I wanted to make to her. But if you want to have this debate, you've got to do it, without making trans people seem like the problem. Because people like you and me, Vicky, we might be spectators of sport and we might enjoy watching the odd, big event. We don't know enough about this. We just know that we suddenly are people that we've never met before.
What we know is that trans people once again are in the firing line, and this time the subject is sports.
Yeah,
but all the other rhetoric is the same.
It's the same argument.
It's the same argument with a different topic.
Yeah. And they'll find instances constantly of, where they can prove that, oh, look, this is where, trans is the problem. But it's not. The problem is that you're going to get situations where where body difference matters, where there is the biological binary, and it does have when its impact and its presence is foul, is in sport, and it's one of those things that we've got to be. You can't just go in there and say, right, there isn't a debate to be had. Maybe there is, but it's not something we are experts in, and it's not something Sharron is interested in. It's become something else. And the reason Neil Fox is talking about it is because, like I said, it's one of those cultural war, talking points. It's the same reason like Tucker Carlson talks about it. Do we believe that he cares about the welfare and the fairness of women in sport? Of course we don't.
It's interesting how this topic has popped up on all these kind of shows in these past couple of days. and they're all at it. I know Felix Fern has been on one show. You've been on this show. Kirsty's been on a show. So it's it's suddenly like fodder for the likes of GB News and.
But when producers that work for these talking point kind of, when they invite the public to have opinions, because they'll say, tell us your views on this, tweet us. It has to be something that's going to get people's
they like a good fight, don't they? They like a good
that's why. So maybe, we're part of the problem. I'm part of the problem by going on something like this because
you are actually in sports. This is your sport. On TV.
This is me sparring.
This is you. We're doing your sport right now.
Maybe we should get Kellie Maloney to train me up.
Yeah, there you go. Let's give her a call.
Yeah. They'll be like, do you remember they did do you remember that famous exhibition of Warhol and Basquiat where they did it as a boxing promotion poster? So yeah, if I ever go head to head with J.K. Rowling, it'd be me boxing gloves like this and her boxing gloves on the other side. That's going to happen.
Right, well,
that's my ultimate goal.
Stay tuned, you heard it here first.
It's never going to happen. J.K. Rowling never answers questions about anything.
Yeah, I've yet to see J.K. Rowling on any TV show talking about the stuff that she tweets about. She never appears anywhere. But
because she gets little...
You want to lay down the gauntlet, give her a challenge?
Yeah. Well, but she gets other people to do a bidding for her. That's how she operates. Because
I think they do it for her without her even asking.
Oh no, they definitely are in the same WhatsApp group.
Yeah. Right. Well, I think we've got to the end of the topic.
I think
that
went. I mean, it was all right, wasn't it? I made a few interesting points, but it was. I just, like I said, disappointed that I didn't get to talk to Sharron.
Maybe next time.
Yeah. We'll see. I'll probably pop up on some, in the shallow end of the tabloid media again at some point. Well, thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching. Please subscribe. And here's the magic subscribe button. Look at that.
Don't forget to subscribe.
I've also got some new and interesting background nebulas. So I'll just show you a few more of those. Check this one out. Check out that one.
See the stars.
And then there's this one. That one looks a bit mysterious and sinister.
I look mysterious and sinister?
No, the background does.
Oh.
Well, actually, come to think of it, maybe you do too, yeah. I think my favourite one is this one, this purple one, because it kind of matches with the nebulous.
I can't see what you can see.
No, you can't, but yeah, anyway. So let's say
What's that I can see up there? Is that Elon Musk floating around in Earth's lower orbit?
It could well be.
Let's hope he burns up.
Right, so we'll say our bye-byes.
Bye-bye. Next time.
Catch you later. Bye.